Today, we are addressing a deeply concerning issue, food security in South Africa. The latest report from Stats SA reveals that in 2023, a staggering 19.7% of households experienced moderate to severe food insecurity. Even more alarming is 8% face severe food insecurity. Adding to this, the report highlights a significant disparity, showing that female-headed households are disproportionately affected. To help us understand these critical findings, we are now joined by Stats SA's Deputy Director General, Acting Deputy Director General, Molayi. Solly, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Let's first start off with the definition of food insecurity as well as severe food insecurity.
Good morning, Aldrin, and good morning to the viewers. Indeed, let's start with the definitions, because I think it will give us a context in terms of the report itself. So when we refer to food insecurity, it's when we're saying it's a situation when people lack secure access to sufficient amount of safe, nutritious food for normal growth, development, and active and healthy life. So I think the key words there, it's secure access. And again, the other important part is to have sufficient amount of safe for your normal activity. So when we refer to a household that is experiencing a moderate to severe food insecurity, this is when the household, they don't have ability to obtain food, or there's a compromise, and there's a compromise of quality and quantity. So it's an issue of quantity and quality of food consumption. The severe part of the scale, it's when typically people are running out of food and worse, they're gone for days without eating. So the report is looking at the scale. We are using what we call it the household food insecurity access scale. Yeah. So this scale gives us a sense of to what extent the household are experiencing food insecurity.
Yeah. Does it give us an idea of, for instance, if you look at a month on average, there are 30 days in a month. For how many days in a month such a family would go without food?
Yes, indeed. And the other thing that I also want to just to touch before I get to your point is that when you look at food security or food security in South Africa, actually it's in 4 dimensions already. So there's an issue of availability of food. Normally you'll get it from the production side in terms of supplying food. Then there's an access, the ability to obtain food physically and economically through various methods. And the access part is the part that the report talks to. Then there's a utilization, meaning that does your body able to, the quantity of food that you are consuming, is it of good quality and also providing nutrients that are needed? And the 4th leg of these dimensions, you're talking about stability, because there must be stability between availability, access, and utility. And then that's how we're looking at food security. And to answer your question, when you look at the report, what we are seeing is that and the way we have done the report is that we look at the point before COVID, which is 2019, to compare post-COVID. And we're seeing that households are actually experiencing food insecurity in South Africa, and it's been increasing. In terms of the actual numbers of households, we are sitting around 3.7 million households who are saying they're experiencing moderate to severe. And this is in the period of the 12 months period. And then the severe household, we're talking about 1.7 million. And as you said, the female-headed households are the ones that are more vulnerable to food insecurity.
Yeah, and again, when we look at the demographics with the Black African-headed households, the food insecurity there is 21.7%, which is higher than the national average. Tell us more about that.
Yes, we're seeing that the population group, especially Black African and colored, they have the high, or they're experiencing high food insecurity, whether it's a moderate to severe or severe. And what we are also seeing is that for those households that are receiving social grant, and I think I'm linking this to your discussion that you had last week around the budget. When you look at the households that are receiving social grants, their food insecurity is high compared to those who are not receiving social grant, which again, it talks to the point that I was raising the other day that says household with social grant, it is a safety net for them, because now you can look at it from the hunger report that we have released last week. It talks to that issue. the report that we're discussing today, food security, it talks about that social grant, it plays a role as a main source of income in those households. When you look at households that have no one who's working in the household, their food security, it's high, which also talks to the level of unemployment in South Africa, because for you to have access to food, you have to have the ability to buy food. And again, Aldrin, if you look at the numbers that we released recently in terms of the PPI and the CPI, the production index, it also shows that product index, it shows us that it is increasing, and by extension, it means that the prices subsequently will also increase. And it's not surprising to look at the January CPI index. It's also showing us that the CPIs has increased, and specifically to zoom into the maize meal, which is most of us, I'm the one who also consuming the maize meal. The prices for maize meal, when you compare to the previous month, it has increased. That on its own, it also gives you a sense of why we're seeing the numbers the way we're seeing the numbers.
Yeah, so this also then goes back to that point around the cost of living, but also the cost of food and the high prices related to that. Considering the debate that is currently underway around the value-added tax and whether or not to increase it, and some people arguing that it will hurt the poor more, but Treasury countering this and saying that the zero VAT rated basket is going to increase. From a statistical perspective, does that go any further in dealing with this issue of food insecurity?
Yes. So if you look at the survey that we have released around the income and expenditure, basically give you a sense of, if you are a household, where do you spend money? The first part of where we spend money, most of South African, it's your household, your water and electricity. That's the chunk of money, that's where we spend money. It's followed by food and non-beverages dimension. This is where now food comes in. That's where now you look at issues around cereal products. And cereal products here, we're referring to your flour. That's where you find your maize meal. That's where you also find your samp. I'm a big fan of samp. And when I look at every time when we're releasing the CPI, I see that the samp is actually have increased when you look at from the previous year by 15.4%. So it gives you a sense of where households are spending their money, then followed by transport and pension and insurance. So when you look at the VAT, it's not only the zero-rated product, but it's the bulk of the money that households are spending. They're also spending on other activities that are not VAT, zero-rated VAT.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me as well is looking at the households that use agriculture or as sustenance or sustenance farming, that agricultural activities are facing moderate to severe insecurity in 2023 at around 25%, while the percentage of households not involved in agriculture was surprisingly lower at 18.5%. What does this tell us? Because the assumption would be, because they're involved in agriculture, there's more food security there. They are growing their own food.
Yes. I think the way we have to read the numbers is that we ask the household whether are you involved in agricultural activities, and they said yes. And we ask them for what reason, and they're saying it's for extra food. And what we are seeing is that those households, their food insecurity, and you have to look at it against the ones that are saying they are doing this for extra source of income. Their food insecurity is quite high also. And this is have to do with the part of the definition that I was saying. It's not about access to food, but it's about quality and quantity of food that you are having access to. So it gives us a sense that as much as they are growing their own food, but it's the quality and the quantity of that food that give us a food insecurity in terms of from the access dimension point of view.
Yeah, and then just quickly in conclusion, looking at from a municipality level perspective, Mangaung leading with severe food insecurity at 11.6%, followed by Johannesburg at 9.7%. And people would look at this and say, but wait, these are metros and they're considered to be urban areas. And this is where you'd assume that more people would have actually food security. But the data is showing us something different.
Yes. Remember, it's about having access to food, meaning the ability to obtain food. Meaning, when you look at the metros, it's about the prices now comes in. That's where the CPI become a very good indicator. Because when the meal become expensive for the household, that means the household cannot be able to have access to food. So that's how we need to read it. And again, if you look at Mangaung, and then you look at the numbers that we've released in terms of unemployment, you realize that Free State, it is one of the highest provinces when coming to unemployment. So again, Adrian, it also gives you a sense of what is happening within the household. If you overlay this data with the poverty numbers, and I think around June, you can call me and then I'll come and break down the numbers around poverty. But the last report that we did around poverty, when you look at what are the drivers for poverty, it's unemployment, and unemployment contributes the most in terms of poverty. So when you look at these households that are saying they are experiencing food insecurity, again, it's ability to buy food and put it on the table. That is the reason why we're seeing these numbers.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've looked at this as yet, Solly, but is there any correlation between food insecurity as well as the health status of an individual, whether the person is healthy or not? I know that normally when we speak about children, we'll have conversations about stunting and so forth, but now just looking in general, is there correlation at all?
Yes. So if you look at this scale, when you get into yourself, yes, so those households are around 1.7 million. We're saying we're profiling them as food insecure and they're experiencing the severe, which is the last level of this scale. That's where now hunger comes in. That's where starvation comes in. So that's where we're saying it's where we're talking about undernutrition. So this is the severe undernutrition. So those households, if you profile them and you look at them, firstly, Adrian, if you look at the profile of those households, you'll find that the household size, it's ranging between 4 to 6. So which means there's more people in those particular houses. That's one. Two, we've already mentioned this, that if you look at the profile, again, it's female-headed household, and again, it's black female-headed household. And this is not something that we are only seeing from this report. If you look at the labor force, black African females, they are vulnerable to unemployment. Again, if you look at the other report that we have released around the grandfathers, the grandparents that are living with children, again, we found that in those provinces that we already mentioned, that's where now you find your elders that are living with grandchildren. And the CPI is already telling us that the pensioners are experiencing a high inflation. So it's that combination that tells you that what happens to the children within the household, especially those who are experiencing the severe food insecurity.
Yeah, and in terms of data relating to fatalities due to starvation or hunger, is there any data that you looked into?
I think from this report, we haven't captured the information around the report that is going to be out in the next few months that talks about the causes of death in South Africa. This is where now we will be profiling all the deaths that have happened in the past few years. And I think at that point, we'll be able to break you the numbers and give you a sense of the ones that are actually caused or led by the issue of lack of food.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Solly Molayi is the acting DDG at Stats SA and looking at this issue around food insecurity in the country, moderate to severe food insecurity. And it is currently stands, we have 19.7% of households in the country in 2023 experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity.